I never imagined that my life would turn into a battleground over money. For most of my childhood, wealth was something distant, something I saw in movies or read about in magazines. My grandparents, however, were different. They were quiet people, modest in their ways, yet beneath their calm exterior lay an empire. They had built their fortune from the ground up, investing wisely in real estate while raising their family with old-fashioned discipline. My mother stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes blazing. Don't come crawling back when it all falls apart. The door shut behind me with a finality I'll never forget. I stood there on the porch, the night air cutting against my skin, staring at the house that had never truly felt like home. I was homeless, cast out by the very people who were supposed to protect me. But as I loaded my boxes into a taxi and the driver, the address of my grandparents' house, the sprawling estate I had inherited, I realized something. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. The house stood like a fortress against the night, its tall windows glowing faintly as I approached. It had always been my refuge, the place where summers were spent running through the gardens, winters curled by the fireplace with hot cocoa and stories. Now it was mine. Yet when I stepped inside, the silence was overwhelming. The smell of old wood and books lingered, mixed with the faint perfume of my grandmother's roses. Their portraits hung on the walls, watching me with eyes that seemed both kind and knowing. I walked from room to room, touching the furniture, the pictures, the mementos of their lives. It felt surreal, like I was trespassing in a place sacred and untouchable. But it was mine now, my inheritance, my burden. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my grandfather's old study, staring at the documents the lawyer had given me. Bank accounts, stocks, deeds to properties. Numbers that felt unreal, stretching into the millions. I should have felt secure. Instead, I felt hunted, because I knew my parents wouldn't stop. I was right. It was only a matter of days before the storm followed me to the mansion. First came the calls, voicemails filled with demands, threats, even tears. My father's voice cold and commanding, my mother's syrupy and venomous. Then came the visits, cars pulling up the driveway, fists pounding at the door. "This isn't yours," they shouted. "It belongs to us. Open the door." I didn't. I stayed locked inside, watching from the upstairs window as the people who had raised me turned into strangers fueled by greed. And then one night, I wasn't alone. The sound of footsteps echoed through the halls. At first, my heart leapt into my throat. I thought my parents had broken in. I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy candlestick, and crept through the corridor. "Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm about to share my story, but before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more interesting videos. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I spent more time with my own parents during my brought up. My parents were always busy, my father chasing promotions, my mother chasing status. I often felt like an accessory in their marriage, something to display when convenient and tuck away when not. But with my grandparents, I was never invisible. They listened to me. They taught me. They made me feel like I mattered. So when they passed, first my grandmother, then my grandfather just months later, I was devastated. Grief hollowed me out. I didn't think much about the will, or their estate, or any of the legal matters. I only thought about the empty chairs at the dinner table, the absence of their laughter in the house, the silence that fell like a curtain over the memories we had shared. But grief has a cruel way of being interrupted by reality. It was at the lawyer's office where everything shifted. My parents and I sat side by side, though I could feel the tension rolling off them like heat waves. The lawyer, a stern man with wire-rimmed glasses, unfolded a document that would fracture whatever remained of my family ties. In accordance with the last will and testament of Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, he began, their entire estate, valued at approximately $26 million, is to be transferred in full to their grandchild. The room froze. At first, I thought I had misheard. Me? Not my father, their only son. Not my mother, the daughter-in-law who always boasted about how she was practically their caretaker in their old age. Me. I remember staring at the lawyer, my heart pounding. My parents' faces told the story more clearly than words ever could. Shock, disbelief, then something darker. My father's knuckles went white as he gripped the arm of his chair. My mother's lips parted, her painted smile faltering into something sharp and cold. You mean my father finally managed? The entire estate goes to them? He didn't even say my name. That is correct, the lawyer said calmly. Your parents were very clear in their wishes. The assets, properties, accounts, and holdings, all in their entirety, are bequeathed to their grandchild. I didn't feel joy. Not then. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. The meeting ended in strained silence. My parents barely looked at me as we walked out of the office. But that night, the storm broke. We were sitting in the living room of my parents' house, the air thick with unspoken rage. My father paced like a predator, my mother sat stiff-backed on the couch, and I, still numb from the news, tried to process it all. This is absurd. My father snapped. You're a child. I'm 23. I cut in, though my voice trembled. A child, he repeated, glaring at me. You have no idea how to manage that kind of money.
It should have come to me, to us.
That's how inheritance works. Parents to children. Not skipping a generation because of some sentimental whim. It wasn't a whim, I said, my throat tightening. They made their choice. They trusted me. My mother's eyes, usually painted with false warmth, narrowed like a hawk's. Then if you respect us at all, you'll transfer it to us. All of it. We'll handle it, and you won't have to worry about a thing. It was as if they hadn't heard me, or perhaps they didn't care. I shook my head slowly.
No.
This is what they wanted, and I'm not giving it away. The room turned cold. My father's pacing stopped. My mother's face hardened. Something between us shattered in that moment. It didn't take long for their true colors to show. In the days that followed, I became a stranger in my own home. My parents locked me out of accounts, canceled my access to the car, even took my phone off the family plan. It was punishment wrapped in control, a way to remind me of my dependence. One evening, I came home from visiting the lawyer again, only to find my belongings stacked neatly in boxes by the front door. What is this? I asked, my voice cracking. My father didn't even look at me as he said, You have your grandparents' fortune. Use it. You're not welcome here anymore. But when I turned the corner, I froze. It wasn't my parents. It was Mr. Bennett, the caretaker my grandparents had employed for years. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that had watched me grow up. I figured you'd be here, he said softly. Your grandparents, they told me if anything ever happened, I was to look after you. Seems they knew something we didn't. Relief washed over me so hard I nearly dropped the candlestick. From that moment on, I wasn't alone. Mr. Bennett became more than a caretaker. He became a shield, a mentor, and a reminder of the loyalty my grandparents had inspired in people. He moved quietly through the house, repairing things that had fallen into disuse, keeping the estate alive in ways I didn't even understand. But as the days passed, my parents' desperation turned vicious. At first, their efforts were laughable. My father sending letters demanding that I do the right thing and sign the estate over. My mother leaving voicemails about how family should come first. But soon their true faces emerged. They began showing up in the middle of the night, parking outside the mansion with their headlights aimed at the windows. I could hear their voices echoing through the gates. You're nothing without us. You'll regret this. Open the gates, damn it. The neighbors whispered. The once dignified family name was becoming scandalous gossip. I tried ignoring it, but then one morning, I woke to find the locks on the gates smashed, the garden trampled, and a crude message spray-painted across the driveway. OURS. That's when I knew. They weren't just angry. They were preparing to take what they believed was theirs by force. Not long after, an official notice arrived. My parents were suing me. The claim? That I was mentally unfit to handle the estate and that the fortune should be transferred into their guardianship for my own protection. I sat in the study, letter trembling in my hands as rage boiled in my chest. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice, firm and steady. "They'll test you, child. When money's involved, people reveal who they really are. Stand strong." And I did. With Mr. Bennett's help, I found a lawyer, Miss Collins. She was sharp-eyed, her words precise like a blade. When I told her the story, she leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. "They don't have a case," she said, "but they're hoping to scare you, to drain you, to force you into surrender. If you're ready to fight, I'll fight with you." For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt something like courage. The lawsuit dragged on for weeks, but my parents weren't content to wait. They escalated. One morning, I went into town only to find my accounts temporarily frozen. My father had somehow convinced the bank that I was reckless and untrustworthy. For hours, I stood in line, humiliated, trying to explain. It was only after Miss Collins intervened with legal documents that my access was restored. The message was clear. They wanted me cornered. And one night, they nearly succeeded. I was returning from a late meeting with Miss Collins when I found the mansion's electricity cut. The house was plunged into darkness, silent and foreboding. My phone had no signal. "Stay close," Mr. Bennett whispered as we moved through the halls with flashlights. Then came the sound, glass shattering. Footsteps. Voices. They were inside. I never saw their faces clearly, but I didn't need to. I recognized the silhouettes. My parents. My own flesh and blood, breaking into the home of the grandparents they once praised. "Get out," I shouted, my voice trembling but loud. There was silence, then the sharp slam of the door as they vanished into the night. But the damage was done. I felt violated, unsafe. I realized then that they would stop at nothing. Not threats, not lawsuits, not even breaking the law. For the first time in my life, I began to think not only of defense, but of revenge. One rainy afternoon, as I sorted through my grandfather's study, I stumbled upon a small locked drawer in his desk. With Mr. Bennett's help, we found the key hidden beneath the rug. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name on it. My hands shook as I opened it. It wasn't a will, it was a letter. "My dear grandchild," it read. "If you are reading this, then you already know the storm that follows wealth. We left everything to you not because we wished to hurt others, but because we saw in you the honesty and strength they lacked. Protect what we've built. Use it wisely. And remember, true wealth is not in possession, but in legacy. Those who seek to steal will only destroy themselves." Tears blurred the words, but a strange fire lit within me. My grandparents had foreseen this chaos. They had chosen me not just as an heir, but as a guardian of something greater. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. It began small. I stopped answering my parents' calls. I stopped engaging with their letters, their threats, their theatrics. Instead, I poured my energy into building the foundation my grandparents had dreamed of, a charitable trust to help underprivileged children, funded by the fortune they had left. When my parents found out, they were livid. "You're wasting it," my father roared in court. "That money is ours. It's our family's." "No," I said firmly, my voice steady at last. "It was never yours. It was theirs. And now it's being used for what they wanted." Miss Collins smirked at the stunned silence in the courtroom. The judge sided with me, dismissing their case as baseless. But I wasn't done. I knew my parents. They cared about appearances. Their reputation in society was their crown jewel. And so, with Miss Collins' guidance, I began gathering evidence. Every threatening voicemail, every trespass, every attempt to sabotage me. Piece by piece, a story of greed and cruelty took shape. And when the time was right, we released it, not as a scandal sheet, but as part of the Foundation's launch. This foundation is dedicated to my grandparents' memory, built despite the opposition of those who tried to take what was never theirs. The media caught fire. Articles painted me as the devoted grandchild, the protector of legacy. My parents? They were cast as villains, selfish, grasping, consumed by greed. For people obsessed with their social standing, it was the ultimate blow. The next time I saw them was not in court, not at the mansion gates, but at a society event where they once basked in glory. They stood in the corner, ignored, whispers circling them like vultures. My father's face was gray, my mother's smile brittle. They avoided my eyes, but I could feel the weight of their humiliation. I should have felt satisfaction. And I did, partly. But beneath it was something else, an ache. This was my family, and I had destroyed them. Or maybe they had destroyed themselves. Mr. Bennet put a hand on my shoulder, as if reading my thoughts. "Revenge doesn't heal the wound," he said gently. "But sometimes it protects the scar from being cut open again." The lawsuit finally ended with the judge ruling in my favor. The estate was mine, uncontested. My parents, disgraced and bitter, slumped back into obscurity. But their absence didn't erase the pain. Nights were still restless. I still woke, sometimes thinking I heard shouting outside, saw shadows at the window. And yet, slowly, the house began to feel like home again. With Mr. Bennet's steady presence, and with the foundation taking root, I found purpose. I wasn't just surviving their betrayal, I was transforming it into something larger than myself. Still, I knew the story wasn't over. Families don't vanish so easily. And revenge, once kindled, rarely burns out without one final confrontation. For a while, I believed it was over. The courts had spoken, the estate was safe, and my parents had been silenced by the weight of their own disgrace. But deep down, I knew them better than that. People like my parents don't disappear quietly. They plot. They wait. They circle like vultures for the moment when weakness shows. And sure enough, that moment came. It began with a letter slipped under the gate. No return address. No signature. Just words scrawled in my father's handwriting. "You may think you've won, but this isn't over. Meet us face to face and settle this, or everything will come crashing down." I almost threw it away, but something inside me, perhaps exhaustion, perhaps defiance, compelled me to respond. I sent a single message through my lawyer. "One last meeting. At the mansion. Tomorrow night." If they wanted a confrontation, they'd have it. On my terms. The night was heavy with storm clouds as I prepared. Mr. Bennet was there, his quiet presence grounding me. Miss Collins insisted on being present too. "Just in case," she said, slipping files into her briefcase like weapons. We set the scene in my grandparents' study, the heart of the mansion. Their portraits loomed above us, silent witnesses to the family they had once built, and the battle it had become. When the gates creaked open and my parents entered, I felt my chest tighten. They looked older than I remembered. My father's shoulders stooped, my mother's elegance cracking beneath the strain. Yet their eyes still gleamed with that relentless hunger. "So," my father said, his voice cold, "this is how you treat your parents? Ambushes, lawsuits, humiliation in front of the entire city. You did that to yourselves," I said evenly. My mother's lips curled. "You think you've won because of some legal technicality. But that money, it was always meant for us. We raised you. You owe us." "No," I said firmly. "I owe my grandparents, and I've honored them in ways you never could." The shouting escalated quickly. My father pounded his fist on the desk, rattling the pens. My mother's voice shrieked with desperation, demanding, begging, accusing. But then Miss Collins calmly opened her briefcase and slid a stack of papers across the desk. Every voicemail, every trespass, every threat. "The media only saw fragments," she said. "But the courts will see everything if you continue this. And if you try to harm my client again, you won't just lose reputation. You'll face prison." The color drained from my mother's face. My father's jaw clenched, but his silence betrayed him. For the first time, they looked cornered. I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "This ends tonight. You will never again threaten me, this house, or the foundation. You will never again try to steal what doesn't belong to you. If you do, the world will see every last detail of what you've done." My father's eyes narrowed. "And what do we get?" "Nothing." I hesitated. Then, with deliberate calm, I opened a folder of my own. Inside was a document I had drafted with Miss Collins, a stipend agreement.
A yearly sum, I said.
Enough for you to live comfortably, but not enough for you to destroy yourselves with greed. Consider it a final gesture of mercy. Their eyes widened, not with gratitude, but with insult.
To them, it was charity.
To me, it was a leash. After a long silence, my mother snatched the document, her hands trembling.
Fine, she spat.
But don't think this makes us forgive you. I don't need your forgiveness, I said. I need your silence. The confrontation ended, but the storm outside had grown violent. As my parents left, thunder cracked across the sky, rain hammering the roof. I stood at the window, watching their car disappear down the driveway, swallowed by the storm. Mr. Bennett came to stand beside me. "You did it," he said softly. "No," I whispered.
They did to themselves.
I just held my ground. For the first time in months, I felt the weight begin to lift. Weeks later, the foundation launched officially. The grand hall of the mansion was filled with people, not vultures, but allies, supporters, beneficiaries. Photographs of my grandparents adorned the walls, their legacy shining through every speech, every promise, every dollar pledged. I stood at the podium, my voice steady. This foundation is not just about money. It's about memory. It's about honoring two people who built something with their own hands and chose to pass it to the next generation, not for greed, but for good. Their legacy is not measured in millions, but in lives touched. The applause was thunderous, and for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged, not as an heir, but as a custodian of something larger. Months passed. Peace settled over the mansion like a fragile blanket. My parents kept their distance, bound by the agreement and the fear of exposure. But one evening, as the sun dipped low, I received an unexpected visitor. It was my mother, alone. Her face was pale, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "I didn't come for money," she said quickly, perhaps reading the suspicion in my eyes. "I just wanted to see you." Silence stretched between us, heavy with all that had been broken. "Why now?" I asked finally. Her eyes glistened. "Because I see now what your grandparents saw. You're stronger than us, better than us. We let greed blind us. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry." For a moment, the anger in me wavered. Beneath the venom and betrayal, she was still my mother. Flawed, broken, but human. "I can't forget what you did," I said quietly. "But maybe one day, I can forgive." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, and left without another word. In the years that followed, the foundation grew, touching lives far beyond what I had imagined. Schools were funded, scholarships granted, communities rebuilt. Every success felt like a whisper of approval from my grandparents. My parents faded into the background, living their quiet lives on the stipend. My father never reached out again. My mother wrote letters, sometimes small, tentative attempts at reconciliation. I didn't always reply, but I kept them, because despite everything, they were still family, and family, even broken, leaves a mark you can't erase. Looking back, I realize now that the money was never the real inheritance. It was the lesson, the truth revealed in the darkest hour. That wealth doesn't change people, it reveals them. My parents revealed themselves as greedy, desperate, and hollow. But I, through pain, through betrayal, through the fire of revenge, revealed strength I never knew I had. And as I walk through the halls of the mansion, past the portraits of my grandparents, I finally understand what they saw in me. Not an heir, not a pawn, but a guardian, a protector of legacy, a survivor of betrayal, and in the end, the one who turned revenge into something greater.